And so you couldn't do prohibitions against a number of religious behaviors, practices. Human sacrifice, even though there's a great deal of double standards, right, and hypocrisy, because those gladiatorial games could be argued that those are a kind of human sacrifice. Whether they're for entertainment, blood offerings to ancestral spirits, or part of some sort of criminal justice system, all of that could be construed by some people have, as human sacrifice. But they did not like human sacrifice typically. The human sacrifice, for instance, practiced by the Carthaginians, right? The infants in fire. No. The burning people in giant wicker men by the Druids. No. You couldn't eat people as part of your religious practice. No cannibalism. 3, and they're sometimes allowed it or are comfortable with it, ritual self-castration. Ritual self-castration. Those 3 things you weren't allowed to do. So you can see how there are going to be a lot of things that are going to bother the Roman state about the Christians. So, the Roman Empire is concerned with getting those 3 things from its imperial population. Taxes. Peace and order. Peace, order. Sound like hooks. And 3? What was the 3rd thing? You got it. So, Christians are going to come into conflict with a number of these. There's going to be rumors, since it's a brand new religion, and the Romans are encountering radical religions all over the place. Right? You have the extreme religious expressions of the ancient world. The near Middle Eastern cult of Kabbalah. Their priests castrated themselves. The Druids had mass human sacrifices. So the rumor of a new religion where people are eating people as part of their religious practice, again, right, the communion, it probably was some sort of mistaken interpretation of symbolism and imagery. But it goes against one of those 3 things that you can't do. Cannibalism. No cannibalism as part of your religious practice. And so they're going to come onto the Romans' radar for that reason. But it's the prophetic tradition that's going on, right? Which the Catholic tradition stops with John of Patmos, we mentioned in the last video. But other religious traditions go on much further. For instance, in Islam, a number of centuries later after this, it continues. In the Mormon tradition, it goes all the way into the 1800s, right? So the prophetic tradition, according to whichever religion you're talking about, that prophetic tradition changes when it ends, when it begins. And so you can feel how dangerous these kinds of conversations can be, so that's why we use again the word tradition. Or perhaps you can't feel why these are dangerous, which, if you think about it, I'm sure you'll eventually come to why. So these prophets all over the near Middle East are claiming legitimacy through going out to the desert, suffering, they get followers, and it's causing chaos, a little bit of disorder in some Roman provinces, which is another reason why these Christians are they're upsetting the imperial order. And so Pliny, our author, Pliny the Younger, is going to become governor of Bithynia, modern-day Turkey. And he's going to be, at this time, well into his career, right? He was there when Vesuvius erupted. And he is going to be kind of a famous prosecutor. He's from the middle class, but he's going to be known as being a prosecutor. So he's going to be kind of well-equipped to, in terms of the law anyway, deal with this new religion. And so he's going to follow a Roman practice which is not enshrined in law, right? It's not illegal to be Christian until like 150 years after this, right? The classical world, the classical traditions, attempt to get along with the Christian traditions for we might consider a long time, until it becomes an explicit governmental decree. And so Pliny is going to follow a kind of process in his prosecution. He's going to encounter a Christian. They're going to be brought before him, and he's going to ask them 3 times. 3 times. Are you a Christian? 3 times. If the person says yes, Pliny will be like, all right, so you've answered yes 1 time. I'm going to ask you 2 more times. And if you say yes 2 more times, if you insist on saying yes, I'm going to have you crucified. Because crucifixion, still at this point, is not a religious symbol. If you're a Roman at this point in time and you hear crucifixion, it would conjure in our minds what we would hear when somebody mentions lethal injection, right? It's what the state uses to put people to death, or it's what the state uses to commit murder, depending on your perspective. And so that's what crucifixion is. It's not an explicit religious symbol yet. And so, are you a Christian? They'll answer yes a 2nd time. And to a Roman mind, this is bonkers, right? This, they can't understand it. Because again, what did we say was not in their religious stories? Witnessing, martyrdom. It's not part of their religious framework. And so it feels really foreign to them. It feels really weird to Pliny. It's inexplicable. And so he asks them a 3rd time. And all they have to do is really 2 things. All they have to do at this point in time is just say no. No, I'm not a Christian. And then, here's the big thing. They would have to worship, as we've mentioned before, an image of the emperor. Worship it as a god. They did those things, they were free to go. That's it. Otherwise they get crucified, which is a hideous way to go. Very, very painful. It lasts days. And so Pliny asks, it's like, all right, here's your third try. Are you Christian? And if they said no, Pliny would be like, all right, will you worship this image of the emperor here? And if they do that, well, then you're free to go. But if they said yes a 3rd time, they get crucified. Like that, right away. Like that, right away. However, there was an exception. There was an exception. And this is, what does it mean when they say the 5 good emperors? Right? It is an empire. This might be it. What is the coin of the realm? What is, if you are caught up in the legal system, what is the phrase that's going to immediately give you rights? Civis Romanus sum. I am a Roman citizen. And it's a phrase that Kennedy uttered before he gave his famous Ich bin ein Berliner speech at the Berlin Wall. It is the coin of the realm in the Roman Empire, that you were immediately granted rights. Right? Not quite what we would call due process, but for our purposes, it's a kind of due process. So, if the person claimed Roman citizenship, but they still said yes to the Christian in question 3 times, Pliny would send them back to Rome for trial. But if they weren't a Roman citizen, totally expendable. Totally expendable. Crucified right there. Seems pretty harsh. But we'll ask some questions later. Because one of the virtues of studying the ancient world is that it allows you to begin asking questions about your own world. Not that you should, in a triumphalist kind of manner, be like, look how far we've come. But they teach you how to ask questions about yourselves. And so, Ignatius of Antioch, like we mentioned, is going to be presented with this kind of scenario where he's going to be asked 3 times. are you a Christian? Of course, he's going to say yes. And he's like, all right, you're going to be crucified. He's just a person from Syria, Antioch. He's not a Roman citizen. And he's like, yes, put me to death, but what I really want is for you to send me back to Rome to be fed to the lions, right? So to make a spectacle of his martyrdom. And he gets his wish. He gets sent back to Rome, and as he is being sent back to Rome, his prison train, he writes letters, and we have these letters. And it's in these letters that he brings up the term Christian, which just means the anointed. And this is like probably in the 90s CE. So Nero burning the Christians in 64 is 30 years too soon to have the term Christian. And so it becomes, at that point, an identity with a name. The anointed ones, the anointed ones. He eventually gets sent back, and he is martyred in the Circus Maximus. There are no records of people being fed to the lions, Christians being fed to the lions in the Colosseum, even though that's where the Pope still holds a kind of service every year for the Christian martyrs. It was all done in the Circus Maximus. So that is the kind of cultural, political, religious moment, complex. The rise of a near Middle Eastern religious tradition that is not compatible with the Roman state and the Roman values, and for a number of reasons. And we'll get into the more Dionysian, the kind of personal class issues that are also going to come up, right? So the Romans are going to have a problem with the Christians for a lot of reasons. In this video, it's just been, right, no cannibalism. No cannibalism. Don't eat people. 2, they're disrupting order. All these prophets running around, it's creating chaos. You can't levy taxes, you can't get your allied military levies. It's causing problems. So those are the 2 reasons why Pliny is going to start investigating the Christians. And when he encounters some actual Christians, or Christians who were Christians but are no longer Christians, or what is the word Christian? What does it even mean? Is it a crime? He doesn't even know. But the answer to these questions will be fascinating.